good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we return to downtown Miami, to the waterfront lights of Bayside Marketplace on January 1st, 2024. It was the kind of place that should have felt ordinary. Bright storefronts, food courts, music drifting between restaurants, tourists walking near the water, families moving through the open spaces of a public mall on a holiday night. Then something changed. What followed was not a simple alien story. It was not a simple debunking story either. It was a real public panic, a real police response, and then, almost overnight, a worldwide rumor about 8 to 10 foot beings moving through the mall. The strange part is not only what people thought they saw, it is how quickly so many people believed a version of the night that no clear video ever proved. So tonight, we'll move slowly through the incident. The crowd, the loud bangs, the police lights, the videos, the shadows, the official explanation, and the feeling that remained after the facts had already been stated. Settle in now, find a comfortable place, let the day fall away, and let the story unfold at its own quiet pace. And if you want more calm investigations into strange encounters and unexplained stories, remember to like and subscribe so you do not miss what is still to come. We begin before the rumor, in the ordinary place where everything first went wrong. Bayside Marketplace was not supposed to become part of an alien story. It sits in downtown Miami, beside the water, at 401 Biscayne Boulevard, a place of restaurants, bright shop windows, music, boat tours, visitors, families, and people passing through with bags in their hands and phones in their pockets. On most nights, it is not mysterious at all. It is busy, loud, warm, and public. That is part of what made the story feel so strange later. Because the rumor did not begin in a desert. It did not begin near a restricted military site, or in a lonely field, or on a quiet road where one witness stood alone under the sky. It began in a place built to be seen. A place with crowds, a place with cameras, a place where strangers are always walking past each other, where the lights stay on, where the city feels close. And still, by the time the story reached the internet, people were talking about creatures, not just something strange in the distance, not just a light over the water, but tall beings, shadow-like figures, something 8 to 10 feet high, something moving through the mall while police cars filled the streets outside. That version came later. Before that, there was only the place itself. On January 1st, 2024, Bayside Marketplace had the feel of a holiday public space. People were still close to the new year. The city had not fully settled back into its normal rhythm. Visitors were out. Teenagers were out. Families were moving through the area. Some people came for food. Some came for the waterfront. Some were simply passing through because downtown Miami has a way of pulling people toward light and sound. The air near the bay can make a place feel open, even when it is crowded. You can have music behind you, restaurant noise beside you, traffic beyond you, and still feel that dark water somewhere nearby. The boats, the breeze, the hard shine of the city. Nothing about that scene suggests a case file. That matters. In many older UFO stories, the setting does half the work. A witness stands alone in a pasture. A car stalls on an empty road. A farmhouse loses power. A light hangs over a tree line, and there is no one nearby to confirm or deny what happened. The loneliness gives the mystery room to breathe. But Bayside Marketplace was not lonely. It was crowded. That should have made the story easier to settle. More people should mean more witnesses, more phones, more angles, more proof. A public place should leave fewer gaps than a dark field, and yet the opposite happened. The crowd didn't make the story clear. The crowd made it louder. The police response was real. The panic was real. The disturbance was real. Those parts do not depend on the alien rumor. Miami police later described a large crowd, juveniles involved in disorder, fireworks, and a response to reports that some people thought might be gunfire. Local reports described teenagers causing chaos, fighting, setting off fireworks, and drawing officers into the area. That is the factual ground, not a clean, quiet sighting, not a confirmed contact event, a disturbance in a busy public place. But facts do not always arrive first in the human mind. Sometimes fear arrives first. Sometimes the body understands danger before the brain understands cause. One loud bang is one shout, one sudden movement from a group nearby. That can be enough. In a crowded mall, people do not wait for a full report. They watch faces. They watch motion. They watch the direction others are running. If someone near them turns sharply and moves fast, the meaning spreads before the words do. If another person shouts that something is happening, the sound itself becomes a signal. Then everyone is reading everyone else. No one needs to know the truth for fear to become real. That is one of the keys to this incident. The event did not need aliens for people to feel something strange. It only needed confusion, noise, crowd movement, and a sudden sense that the ordinary rules of the place had broken. A public space can change in a second. The same storefronts that looked bright a moment before begin to feel exposed. The same walkways that carried people calmly now become exit paths. The same crowd that made the place feel alive begins to feel like pressure. People look over shoulders, they move faster, they stop listening for music, and start listening for danger. And when that happens, memory begins to form under stress. Not later, in peace, not with distance, in the middle of motion. That is where rumors are born. The official version of the night begins with disorder. A large group of juveniles, fireworks, fighting. A response from police. Reports that some people may have mistaken the fireworks for gunfire. Nothing in that baseline requires something inhuman. Nothing in it proves anything beyond a public disturbance that grew fast enough to draw a large response. But the online version grew from a different feeling. It grew from the image of too many police cars, from clips that looked severe, from distant lights, from shadows, from the belief that a normal explanation did not match the emotional size of what people were seeing. That gap is where the Miami Mall incident lives. The event itself was grounded. The fear was immediate. The police response was visible. But the story that followed became something else. It became a test of what people believe when official facts arrive after a frightening image has already taken hold. This is why the ordinary setting matters so much. If the same rumor had begun at an empty warehouse or a closed military site, it would have felt like a familiar kind of mystery. But Bayside was open, bright, and public. That made the alien claim harder to accept on one level, and strangely more powerful on another. Because if something impossible could happen there, in the middle of a city, in front of crowds and phones and police, then the world would feel less stable than before. That was the emotional pull. Not proof, possibility. By the time people online began asking why there were so many officers, why the footage looked strange, why there were claims of tall figures, and why the official answers seemed so plain. The actual place had already been transformed. Bayside Marketplace was no longer only a waterfront mall. It had become a stage where people projected a much larger fear. A fear that authorities might not be telling the whole truth. A fear that cameras might miss the most important thing. A fear that something could happen in public and still remain unclear. And because the story involved aliens, it carried another feeling too. The old feeling. The one that says the world may be stranger than the official version allows. But before all of that, before the posts, before the edits, before the shadow claims and the 8 to 10 foot beings, there was a crowd in a mall. There was noise, there was movement. There was a moment when people began reacting faster than they could understand. The Miami Mall incident did not begin with a creature stepping into view. It began with the ordinary world losing its shape for a few seconds. And that was enough. The first break in the crowd did not begin as a clear image. It began as sound. A loud bang in a public place is never just a noise. Not anymore. Not in a crowded mall. Not in an American city, where people have learned to read sudden sounds through the fear of what they might be. In the first second, no one knows whether it is a firework, a dropped object, a fight, or something worse. The body reacts before the mind can sort it out. That is what makes a crowd dangerous when it begins to move. At Bayside Marketplace, police and local reports later described a large group of juveniles involved in disorder. There were fireworks. There was fighting. There were reports of chaos around businesses. Multiple callers believed they may have heard gunfire. 4 teenagers were later reported arrested in connection with the disturbance. Those details matter because they keep the night grounded. This was not, by official account, a clean, unexplained sighting. It was not a lone witness watching a craft hover over a field. It was not a still object hanging over the bay while people stood calmly underneath it. It was noise, movement, confusion, and fear. And fear moved first. Imagine standing in a bright public walkway, hearing a sudden burst of sound, then seeing people ahead of you turn and run. You do not have a full story. You do not have a police report. You do not know who started it or what caused it. But you know one thing. The crowd has changed. That is enough. A person nearby starts moving quickly. Someone else follows. A parent pulls a child by the arm. A group of teenagers pushes past a storefront. Someone shouts something that may or may not be true. The words are half heard, broken by noise. Shots. Run. Move. Go. The crowd does not wait to confirm. It cannot. In moments like that, the source of the first sound matters less than the reaction it creates. If the people closest to the sound begin to flee, the people farther away see only the running. They do not see the firework. They do not see the fight. They do not see the exact cause. They see faces. They see speed. They see a public space turning against itself. Then panic becomes contagious. One person runs because they heard something. Another runs because they saw the first person run. A third runs because 2 people are now running. A fourth hears someone say there might be gunfire. But within seconds, the original cause is no longer the main event. The reaction has become the event. That is one of the simplest explanations for what happened at Bayside Marketplace, and also one of the most unsettling, because it means the night did not need a creature to become frightening. It only needed uncertainty. Police and media reports later pointed to juveniles causing disorder, setting off fireworks, fighting, and creating enough disruption that officers were called in. Some reports described a damage or disorder around businesses. The scene became serious because it was crowded, loud, and unclear. A dense public place does not offer much room for calm thinking once people begin to believe danger is close. No confirmed gunfire needs to exist for the fear of gunfire to shape the whole event. That point is important. When callers report possible shots, officers respond to what might be happening, not only to what has already been proven. When people hear loud bangs and can not see the source, their minds go to the worst answer first. That does not mean they are lying. It means they are trying to survive a moment they do not understand. The same is true for the people in the crowd. A person who runs from a sound does not always know what they are running from. They know only that other people are running too. That shared motion becomes its own kind of evidence. Not factual evidence, human evidence, the kind the body believes. And in that kind of moment, ordinary details blur. A reflection becomes movement. A shadow becomes size. A stranger moving fast becomes a figure. A group becomes a surge. A shout becomes a warning. The bright, safe design of a mall suddenly feels too open, too exposed, too full of exits that everyone else is trying to reach at the same time. The first mystery, then, was not what people saw. It was what people thought they heard. That may sound small compared with the alien story that came later, but it is the root of the whole thing. Without the first panic, there is no massive police image. Without the police image, there is no viral wave of speculation. Without the speculation, there is no worldwide story about tall beings at a waterfront mall. The chain begins with the crowd. Skeptics see this as a textbook case of panic spreading through a public space. Fireworks are set off. People mistake them for gunfire. A group fights or causes disorder. Others react. Police arrive in force because a crowded area and possible gunfire cannot be treated casually. That explanation fits the known facts, but believers point to something else. They point to the scale and speed of the reaction. They ask why the scene looked so large, why so many police vehicles appeared, why the internet was filled with clips that seemed heavier than a normal teen disturbance. They feel that the official cause is too small for the size of the emotional wave that followed. That is where the two versions of the incident begin to split. One version stays with the facts as reported: juveniles, fireworks, fighting, panic, arrest, police response. The other version follows the feeling, the sense that something was off, the idea that a normal explanation cannot fully account for the images people saw afterward, the belief that when a public place fills with police lights, something more serious must have happened behind the explanation. But a feeling is not proof. It can be powerful. It can be sincere. It can stay with a person for years. But it is not the same as a clear recording, a verified witness statement, or physical evidence. And in the Miami Mall incident, the feeling came wrapped around a real disturbance, which made it harder to separate what was known from what was imagined later. That is the strange heart of the night. There was something real at the center, a real disorder, a real crowd, real fear, real officers responding to a situation they could not ignore. But around that real center, the unknown began to gather. Not because the facts pointed to aliens, but because the emotional shape of the event left room for a bigger story. Crowds do that. They create noise without clarity. They multiply fear. They produce memories that do not always line up. One person remembers fireworks. Another remembers shouting. Another remembers people running. Another remembers police lights everywhere Later, after the rumor spreads, someone may remember the night through the rumor itself. What did I see? What did I hear? Why was everyone running? The answers shift, and once the answers shift, the story becomes open. This is why the first break in the crowd matters so much. It was not cinematic. It was not clean. It was not the kind of moment that gives investigators a perfect timeline. It was messy, human, loud, and fast. The kind of moment where one mistake becomes 10 reactions, and 10 reactions become 100. Then the mall is no longer just a mall. It becomes a place where people were afraid before they knew why. By the time officers arrived, the meaning of the night had already begun to change. For some people there, it may have been a frightening disturbance. For people watching later online, it became something else entirely. They did not feel the first bang in their chest. They did not hear the half-shouted warnings. They saw the aftermath, the lights, the officers, the blocked streets, the sense of scale. And that scale became the next mystery. The image that made the internet stop was not a creature, it was the police. Long lines of flashing vehicles, blue and red light washing over the streets, officers moving through the area, traffic held back, crowds pushed away from the center of the disturbance. From a distance, the scene looked less like a response to a mall fight and more like the aftermath of something much larger. That image did more for the Miami Mall rumor than any witness claim ever could, because when people saw those lights, they began to ask the same quiet question in different ways. Why so many officers? Why so many cars? Why would a normal disturbance bring that kind of force into downtown Miami? The official answer was simple. Police had been called to a large disturbance, one involving juveniles. There were reports of fighting. There were fireworks. Some callers believed they might be hearing gunfire in a crowded public area on a holiday night beside a busy waterfront mall. That kind of call cannot be treated slowly. Officers respond first to danger, as it might be, not as it later turns out to have been. That is one of the hardest parts for people watching from the outside to understand. Police do not get to wait until every detail is clean. They do not arrive after the internet has frozen the clip and argued over it for 3 days. They arrive inside the confusion. They hear possible gunfire. They hear a crowd moving. They hear that people may be fighting, running, or damaging property. They know families, tourists, workers, and bystanders are in the area. So the response grows. More units come in. More officers move toward the scene. Roads are controlled. The crowd is pushed back. The first officers need help containing the area. The call spreads across the city. What may begin as a disorder call can quickly look like something far more severe. Because in public safety, the worst possibility has to be handled before the calm explanation is known. That does not mean something hidden happened. It means uncertainty has weight. And at Bayside Marketplace, that uncertainty became visible in the form of police lights. For people standing nearby, the size of the response may have made sense in the moment. They heard the bangs. They saw the crowd moving. They saw officers trying to regain control of a public space. But for people watching later, removed from the sound, removed from the fear, removed from the first few seconds of confusion, the footage had a different feeling. It looked too big. That phrase appears again and again in stories like this. Too big for fireworks. Too big for teenagers. Too big for a fight. Too big for the official explanation. But too big is not a measurement. It is a feeling. and feelings become powerful when the images seem to support them. A clip of police vehicles outside a mall does not show aliens. It does not show creatures. It does not show a hidden event, but it does show force. It shows urgency. It shows a public area treated as a place of danger. And when a viewer does not know the full chain that brought those officers there, the mind fills the gap. The response became the evidence. Not evidence in the careful sense. Not proof, but emotional evidence. The kind people point to when they say, something about this does not look right. That is where the alien rumor found its first strong foothold. A small police response would have made the story weaker. A single patrol car, one officer speaking with a group, a short local report about disorder. That would not have traveled far. It would have been forgettable. But long lines of vehicles, lights filling the street, and officers spread across a busy downtown area gave the story a shape that felt important before anyone knew what the story was. Then the claim had a stage. The rumor could say, look how many police came. It could say, they would never send that many officers for teenagers. It could say, the official story is too small. And once those ideas were attached to the image became difficult to separate from the belief. Even when Miami police denied the alien claims, the visual memory remained. People had already seen the scale. They had already felt the mismatch. The denial arrived after the feeling had taken hold. Miami police later answered several of the viral claims directly. They said there were no aliens, no UFOs, no extraterrestrials, no airports closed, no power outages. The statement was plain, almost dry, because official denials usually are. They are designed to close a rumor, not to satisfy the emotional world that rumor has created. But by then, the story was no longer only about what police said. It was about what people thought the police response implied. For skeptics, the explanation is straightforward. A crowded mall, loud fireworks, reports that may have sounded like gunfire, young people fighting and causing disorder. A public safety response that scaled up because officers had to secure the area before someone was hurt. That fits the available facts. For believers, the same facts feel incomplete. They look at the number of vehicles and the size of the scene. They see an overwhelming response to what later sounds like a routine disturbance. They point to the gap between the calm official language and the severity of the footage. The same image serves both sides. To one side, it shows procedure. To the other, it shows concealment. That is the strange power of police footage in modern rumors. It carries authority and suspicion at the same time. When people see officers everywhere, they know something real happened, but they do not always know what kind of real. The presence of police confirms seriousness, while the lack of clear context invites imagination. And imagination was waiting. The Miami Mall incident happened at a time when many people were already primed to distrust clean explanations. Public trust in institutions had been worn thin by years of arguments, leaks, denials, corrections, and online counterclaims. In that kind of atmosphere, even an ordinary public safety response can look like the edge of a larger hidden story. A police light is no longer just a police light. It becomes a question. Why are they there? What did they see? What are we not being told? Those questions are not proof of anything, but they are enough to keep a rumor alive. They let people move from the known event into the imagined one without feeling that they have left the evidence behind. The vehicles were real. The officers were real. The panic was real. So, the mind says, maybe the rest could be real too. That is how the story expands, step by step. No one needs a clear alien video at first. They only need a real scene that feels too large for its explanation. Then every missing detail becomes suspicious. Every blurry clip becomes important. Every denial becomes part of the pattern. For police, the response may have been the answer. For the internet, it became the beginning. And there is a quiet lesson in that. A tactical response can be correct and still look strange to people who only see it afterward. Officers can be doing exactly what they are supposed to do, while viewers at home read the same scene as evidence of something hidden. The image is not lying, but it is incomplete. That incompleteness is where the Miami Mall story kept breathing. The police lights did not prove aliens. They did not prove a cover-up. They did not prove an impossible event inside Bayside Marketplace, but they gave the rumor weight. They made it feel anchored to something real. They gave the internet an image it could replay, crop, narrate, and turn into a question. Because once those lights were online, the story no longer belonged only to the people who had been there. It belonged to everyone watching, and everyone watching wanted to interpret what they saw. The videos came next. Not one video, not one clean view, not one steady recording that settled the story. There were clips from different angles, different distances, different phones, and different moments. Police lights, crowds, people moving near Bayside Marketplace, streets filled with emergency vehicles, the bright pulse of red and blue against the night, and somehow all of it showed everything and nothing. That is the strange problem with modern footage. A camera can make an event feel undeniable without making it clear. It can prove that something happened, while leaving the most important part open. It can capture fear, light, motion, and scale, but not cause, not meaning, not truth. The Miami Mall incident lived inside that gap. People online saw the police response. They saw the crowd. They saw the size of the scene. They saw overhead angles and shaky phone clips. They saw light reflecting off pavement and buildings. They saw people moving in the distance, small and dark against the wider frame. But no verified video clearly showed an alien creature. No clear close-up showed a non-human figure walking through the mall. No stable recording showed the 8 to 10 foot being. That later became the center of the rumor. Still, the footage felt charged. Part of that came from the way it looked. Night footage is never neutral. It turns ordinary distance into mystery. It turns light into glare. It turns people into shapes. A person walking near strong lights can stretch into a long shadow. A group moving through a wide shot can look strange when the camera is far away. Low resolution can soften edges until arms, legs, and shadows blend into one moving form. Then compression does its work. A video uploaded, saved, reposted, clipped, zoomed, and uploaded again begins to lose detail. Small objects smear, dark areas merge, light blooms, movement becomes less natural. A normal walking pace may look delayed or warped. A shadow can appear to detach from the person making it. A figure in the distance can seem taller than it is because there is no stable point of scale. The image becomes less like a window. It becomes a surface for belief. That does not mean every viewer is dishonest. It does not mean people are trying to fool themselves. It means unclear footage asks the brain to help. The viewer looks at a dark shape and tries to complete it. The viewer sees motion and tries to name it. The viewer hears a rumor, then returns to the image with that rumor already placed in the mind. After that, The clip is no longer empty. It has been given a story. This is why the same footage could mean different things to different people. To one viewer, it showed a police response after a public disturbance. To another, it showed a city locking down after something impossible appeared. To one viewer, a dark figure was just a person walking near light. To another, it was a tall being partly hidden in the chaos. The video did not change. The frame around it did. That frame mattered because most people did not watch the raw scene first. They watched it through captions, comments, reposts, and claims. A clip labeled mall disturbance feels one way. A clip labeled aliens in Miami feels another. The picture may be the same, but the eye enters it differently. And once the eye is told what to seek, it begins searching. A shadow near the edge of a frame. A long, dark shape crossing behind people. A distant form moving in poor light. A blur beside the police line. These became the raw material of the online mystery. Not clear evidence, not a clean recording. Fragments, enough to suggest, not enough to prove. That is often the perfect condition for a rumor. A clear video can be checked. A clear face, a clear body, a clear object, a clear path across the frame. People can measure it, compare it, slow it down, and argue from something solid. But a blurry video stays open. It resists being closed. Every answer can be doubted because the image never fully gives itself. Too dark, too far away, too compressed, too much movement, too much missing. And in those missing spaces, imagination moves freely. The shadow problem became central to the Miami Mall story. Strong lights at night create long shapes, especially when people move near open pavement, glass, or polished surfaces. A person walking between a light source and the camera may appear stretched. If the camera is elevated or far away, the shadow can look like a second figure. If the clip is low quality, the person and the shadow may blur together until the whole shape feels taller, thinner, stranger. That is not exotic. It is basic light. But in the right mood, basic light can feel like evidence. The footage did not create the alien story alone. A video of police lights by itself might have faded quickly. A blurry shadow by itself might have been ignored. But together with the scale of the response and the growing online claims, the clips became something else. They became a place where people could look for confirmation. The image was vague enough to hold the rumor. That is why it spread. If the clips had shown nothing but a calm street and one police car, the story would have had no body. If they had shown a clear creature, the story would have become something else entirely, either proof or a hoax to be tested. But the available footage sat in the middle. It showed a real incident with enough visual confusion to keep people leaning forward. That middle space is powerful. It lets people say, I can see something. It also lets others say, you are seeing only shadow. Both sides can return to the same pixels and feel that the other side is missing what is obvious. This is how blurry footage becomes a battleground, not because it contains more information, but because it contains less. The less certain the image is, the more personal the interpretation becomes. People do not only defend what they see, they defend the way they make sense of fear. And the Miami videos were full of fear. Not screams in every clip, not chaos in every frame, but the aftermath of fear. The police lines, the halted traffic, the crowd pushed back, the sense that something had ruptured the normal flow of the night, even when nothing strange is visible. The scene feels loaded because the response around it is loaded. The internet knows how to work with that kind of image. It slows it down. It zooms in. It circles shapes. It cuts away the boring parts. It adds captions. It repeats the darkest frame. It removes context because context is heavy, and mystery travels faster when it is light. Soon, viewers are no longer watching the incident. They are watching an argument about the incident. And inside that argument, every unclear shape becomes useful. A shadow can become a body. A body can become a creature. A creature can become a cover-up. A cover-up can become proof that the original shadow was never just a shadow, round and round. That is what made the videos feel so strange. They did not answer the question. They multiplied it. They gave believers just enough to keep looking, and skeptics just enough to keep explaining. They became evidence of a mood more than evidence of a being. A mood of suspicion. A mood of dread. A mood that said something happened here, even if the camera cannot show what. And maybe that is the deepest reason the footage stayed alive. It matched the way the story felt. The night was unclear. The clips were unclear. The official answer came after the fear. The rumor came with shadows. Everything about the incident seemed to arrive through partial views. No clean center, no final image, only fragments. That is why the videos showed everything and nothing. They showed the police response. They showed the crowd. They showed the atmosphere of a public place after panic had entered it. But they did not show the extraordinary claim clearly. They did not show a creature. They did not show a non-human figure. They showed a scene that frightened people, and then they allowed people to decide what kind of fear belonged there. The videos did not create the alien story by themselves. The story needed words, and those words arrived next when a vague shadow became something taller, stranger, and far more specific. The most famous part of the Miami Mall incident did not begin as a police report. It began as a claim. After the panic, after the vehicles, after the first clips of flashing lights moved through social media, a new version of the story began to take shape. It was not only that something had happened at Bayside Marketplace. It was not only that police had responded in force. It was that people online began saying there had been beings there, tall beings, shadow beings, creatures 8 to 10 feet tall. That measurement mattered. It gave the rumor a body. Before that, the story was still loose. Something strange. Something they were hiding. Something that made the police come. Those phrases can move around. They can attach to almost anything. But once the number appeared, the rumor felt less like a mood and more like a witness account. 8 to 10 feet. Too tall to be a normal person. Tall enough to frighten. Specific enough to remember. That is how many viral stories harden. They begin in fog. Then someone gives the fog a shape. In the Miami case, the claim did not come from a confirmed, official statement. It did not come from a verified video showing a clear, non-human figure. It did not come from a named witness in a formal report describing a creature in close detail. It came from the online world that formed around the footage after the incident had already started spreading. People saw police lights. They saw distance. They saw blurry motion. They heard that something was not adding up. Then the words arrived. 8 to 10 foot aliens at the mall. Once that phrase existed, the whole story changed. A public disturbance became a contact rumor. A police response became a possible cover-up. A shadow became a figure. And a figure became something people could point to, argue over, defend, mock, fear, and share. The strange thing about a number like 8 to 10 feet is that it sounds almost official. even when it is not. It sounds like someone measured something. It sounds like a person stood close enough to judge scale. It gives the listener a mental picture before the evidence has earned one. A tall shape near a wall, a dark form moving between people, a being too large to belong in a mall. That image is easy to feel. It is much harder to prove. CBS Miami and other local reporting noted that rumors about aliens at the Miami Mall spread across social media after the police response became visible online. Phrases tied to the incident began trending. People reposted clips. They added captions. They asked why the response looked so large. Then others added the creature claim, and the story grew far beyond the original disturbance. This is important because the rumor did not need to be born fully formed. It only needed repetition. One post says there was something tall. Another says people saw shadow aliens. Another says the police were there because of creatures. Another adds the 8 to 10 foot detail. Another pairs that claim with a blurry frame from a video. Soon the viewer encounters not one uncertain claim, but a pattern of similar claims arriving from many directions, and patterns feel like confirmation, even when they all trace back to the same thin source. That is one of the ways the internet changes a rumor, finding that to older stories. A claim often stayed tied to one person. One witness said this. One family saw that. One officer remembered something. The story could be tested against a human source, or at least against a chain of telling. Online, the source can dissolve. A person sees the same claim repeated so many times that the repetition begins to feel like evidence. They may not know who first said it. They may not know whether that person was there. They may not know whether the phrase came from a witness, a joke, a guess, or a caption designed to get attention. They only know they have seen it everywhere, and everywhere feels like proof. The Miami Mall alien claim worked because it gave a simple answer to a complicated image. Police everywhere, crowds moving, distant dark shapes, official denial, public distrust. The alien story gathered all of that into one frightening sentence. There were 8 to 10 foot beings in the mall. It was not careful, but it was clear. And clarity travels. The official explanation was more grounded, but it was also less dramatic. Juveniles, fighting, fireworks, possible mistaken reports of gunfire, police response, arrest. Those details may explain the event, but they do not have the same strange pull as a tall shadow figure moving through a public place while the city locks down around it. That is why corrections often move more slowly than rumors. A correction takes something away. It narrows the world. It says the strange shape was not a creature. It says the video does not show what people think it shows. It says the story is less cosmic, less hidden, less full of meaning than it felt in the moment before. A rumor gives something. It gives fear a form. Miami police eventually addressed the alien claims directly. They said there were no aliens, no unidentified flying objects, no extraterrestrials, no airport closures, and no power outages tied to the incident. They also said the supposed viral alien figure was a person walking with a shadow. A person. A shadow. That was the explanation. And in a calm room, after the fact, it is easy to see why that answer fits the footage better than the claim. A low-quality clip at night can stretch a normal human shape into something strange. Strong light can throw a long shadow across pavement. A person and their shadow can overlap until they look like one tall, dark form. If someone has already told you to search for a creature, the shape can seem to answer the instruction. But by the time the explanation arrived, the story had already become sharp in people's minds. The image stayed blurry. The story became sharp. That is the hammer strike of the Miami incident. The less clear the picture was, the more certain the language became. The footage did not show a creature in a way that could be checked cleanly, but the words gave people one anyway. Tall, shadow-like, 8 to 10 feet. Not human. The mind can hold an image like that, even after the source image fails. For some viewers, the police explanation ended the matter. There was a disturbance. There was panic. There were officers. There were shadows. There was no creature. The alien claim was a social media exaggeration built on poor footage and the mood of suspicion around a real event. For others, the explanation did not satisfy. They asked why so many people were talking about the same thing. They asked why the response looked so large. They asked why the supposed shadow looked unusual to them. They asked why the official answer felt too quick, too neat, too already. Those questions did not prove the alien claim, but they helped it survive. Because once a rumor has become a cover-up story, every denial can be folded back into the rumor. If police say there were no aliens, believers can say, of course they would. If no clear video appears, believers can say the footage was taken down or hidden. If the blurry figure is explained as a person and a shadow, believers can say the explanation is too convenient. The story becomes sealed against correction. Not for everyone, but for enough people to keep it alive. The 8 to 10 foot claim also survived because it fit older patterns. Tall beings have appeared in contact stories for decades. Shadow figures have appeared in folklore, sleep stories, paranormal accounts, and alien rumors. A dark, oversized form moving at the edge of clear vision is one of the oldest shapes fear can take. It is vague enough to belong anywhere, and vivid enough to haunt the mind. Place that shape inside a modern police response, and it feels new. A shadow alien at a mall. An old fear in a new setting. That is why the Miami rumor traveled so far. It joined two worlds that normally stay apart. The ordinary world of shopping centers, police calls, teenagers, fireworks, and phone footage. And the hidden world of beings, cover-ups, strange bodies, and official denial. Once those worlds touched, even briefly, the internet did the rest. It made the claim repeatable. It made the claim visual. It made the claim feel like something people had almost seen for themselves. Almost is a dangerous word in a mystery. Almost seen. Almost proven. Almost caught. Almost clear. The Miami Mall story lived in that almost. The supposed beings were never shown clearly, but the idea of them was strong enough to change how people watched every clip. After the rumor spread, viewers returned to the footage not to ask what was there, but to search for where the creature might be hiding. The frame became a hunt, and once a person begins hunting inside a blurry image, ordinary things become suspects. A passerby, a shadow, a reflection, a compression artifact, a dark area between lights, a normal figure seen from a strange angle. Everything can begin to look like part of the hidden event. That is how the 8 to 10 foot alien claim was born. Not from a clear creature stepping into public view, but from a real panic, a large police response, unclear footage, online repetition, and a phrase with enough force to give the whole night a new shape. The claim was not verified, but it was memorable. And sometimes, in the online world, memorable is enough to keep a story moving, long after the facts have tried to slow it down. After the rumor had a body, people began searching their own memories for something that could match it. a shadow seen while running, a strange movement glimpsed between lights, a tall form that seemed wrong only after the internet gave it a name. Not every strange witness statement begins as a lie. Sometimes a person is trying to describe a real impression formed under pressure, a shape seen while moving, a sound heard through shouting, a dark form glimpsed between lights, a feeling that something was wrong before the mind could explain why. That kind of memory is not clean. It is built in pieces. At Bayside Marketplace, the later online claims described shadows, tall shapes, strange movement, and figures that did not seem normal. Some people spoke as if something had been seen. Others repeated what they had heard. Some may have believed the footage showed it. Some may have remembered the night through fear first and detail second. But no consistent, verified description of a non-human figure exists in reliable reporting. That matters. It means the story has to be handled carefully, not with mockery, not with blind belief, with care. Because two things can be true at once. A person can sincerely believe they saw something strange, and that belief can still be shaped by fear, poor light, crowd movement, and the story that grew afterward. Fear changes the way a moment is stored. When a person is calm, they may remember a scene in order, the room, the people, the sound, the action, the words someone said. But when a person feels danger, memory narrows. The body begins choosing what matters for survival. Where is the exit? Where is the threat? Who is running? Where is the loudest sound coming from? Everything else breaks apart. A crowded public space makes that even harder. There is no single clean view. People are turning, bumping, stopping, running, looking over shoulders. Police lights flash, storefront lights reflect. Someone shouts one thing, someone else shouts another. A person may see only 2 seconds of movement before they are pulled into the larger motion of the crowd. Later, those 2 seconds feel important, maybe more important than they were. That is how a shadow can become a memory. Not because the person is foolish, not because the person wants attention, but because the brain is always trying to complete a scene. It does not like blank spaces. It does not like unfinished danger. If something moved in the corner of the eye, the mind tries to decide what it was. If the body felt fear at the same time, the mind may choose the most threatening shape, a tall figure, a fast movement, something not right. Then, after the fact, the internet gives that impression a name. 8 to 10 foot beings, shadow aliens, creatures at the mall. Once those words are available, they can reach backward into memory. A person who half saw a strange shape may begin to ask whether that was what others were talking about. A person who heard shouting but did not understand it may later connect the shouting to the rumor. A person who watched police lights from a distance may remember the whole night as more unreal than it felt at the time. This is not rare. Human memory is not a video file. It is a living thing. It changes when new information touches it. It becomes stronger in some places and weaker in others. It can add meaning after the moment has passed. That does not make every witness wrong. It makes every witness human. In the Miami incident, this is one of the most important truths. The people who felt that something was off may have truly felt it. The scene may have looked frightening. The response may have looked extreme. The shadows may have looked strange. And if someone was already afraid, already moving, already trying to understand why the crowd had changed, then an unclear shape could feel much more real than it would have felt on a quiet afternoon. Fear sharpens some details. It blurs others. A loud bang may stay in the body. A flash of light may stay. The sight of people running may stay. But the order of events can shift. The source of the sound can become uncertain. The size of a shape can grow in memory. A moment that lasted 1 second can feel much longer, because the body experienced it as danger. This is how ordinary confusion becomes extraordinary testimony. Not always, not in every case, but often enough to matter. And at Bayside Marketplace, the setting made memory even more fragile. Bright light against dark streets, reflections from glass and polished surfaces, people crossing in front of each other, long shadows thrown by strong lamps and flashing vehicles, phone cameras trying to handle darkness, motion, and glare at the same time. Those are not small details. They are the whole visual world of the incident. In that world, a normal person can look strange at a distance. A shadow can stretch beyond the body that made it. A group of people can merge into one dark mass. A figure walking between lights can seem too tall for a moment, then normal again as the angle changes. If the viewer sees only the strange moment and not the normal one, the mind may keep the wrong frame. The mind finished the image before the facts arrived. That is why it is too simple to say that everyone who believed the alien rumor was lying. Many were likely responding to a powerful mix of real fear and unclear information. They saw a large police response. They saw clips that looked severe. They saw online claims repeated again and again. They may have seen a shadow that did not make sense to them. Then belief filled the gap. For skeptics, this is the clearest part of the case. There was a public disturbance. There were fireworks and fighting. There were reports that may have sounded like gunfire. There was no clear video of non-human beings. There was no stable, consistent, verified witness account describing creatures in detail. The simplest answer is panic, shadow, rumor, and memory under stress. For believers, something else remains. They point to the number of people who felt uneasy. They point to the repeated claims of tall shapes. They point to the way the official story seemed too small for the size of the response. They argue that fear alone does not explain why the alien version took hold so quickly. Both sides are looking at the same human problem. How much should we trust memory born inside panic? It is a hard question because memory feels personal. If a person says, "I know what I saw," they are not always making a scientific claim. They are defending the reality of their own fear. They are saying the moment happened to them, inside their own body, with enough force that it still feels true, and that deserves respect. But respect is not the same as proof. A careful telling has to hold both. It has to respect the people who felt afraid, while still saying clearly that unsupported claims cannot become facts just because they are vivid. It has to leave room for sincere confusion, without turning confusion into evidence of creatures. That balance is what the Miami Mall incident asks from us. The story is not strong because a verified alien was seen. No verified alien was seen. The story is strong because it shows how quickly a modern crowd can produce fear, and how quickly the internet can give that fear a body taller than a person, a body made from shadow, a body that may never have been there at all. Still, once the idea exists, it changes the way people remember the scene. This is one of the quietest and most unsettling parts of the incident. The rumor did not only spread forward, it may have reached backward. It may have changed how people thought about what they had already seen. A sound becomes a warning. A shadow becomes a figure becomes a being. And the story becomes easier to remember than the confusion that came before it. That is why witness memory, under fear, has to be treated gently, not because it proves the alien claim, but because it explains why the claim could feel real to people who are never trying to deceive anyone. Fear is not a clean lens. It does not show the world as it is. It shows the world as danger. And danger has a way of making unclear things feel certain. The most haunting part of the Miami Mall incident may not be that people invented something from nothing. It may be that they took something real, a public panic, a police response, a frightening night, and then built a creature from the pieces that would not settle, a shadow, a movement, a memory, a name. If you are still here with us, we have now moved from a crowded mall into something stranger. Not a confirmed creature, not proof of contact, but memory, shadow, fear, and the way a story can grow after the moment itself has already passed. If you are enjoying these calm investigations into strange modern encounters, old case files, on the places where mystery still lingers, remember to like and subscribe so you do not miss the stories still to come. And if you want to leave a thought, tell us what the Miami Mall incident reveals most clearly to you. A hidden event, a public panic, or the way the internet now creates folklore in real time. Now we return to the official explanation and to why it still did not settle the story for everyone. The official explanation was not complicated. Police and local reports said the chaos at Bayside Marketplace came from a large group of juveniles, fighting, fireworks, and panic. Loud bangs were heard. Some people thought they might be gunfire. The crowd reacted. Officers came in heavily because the situation was public, crowded, and unclear. 4 teenagers were reported arrested in connection with the disturbance. That is the factual baseline. No creature, no confirmed non-human figure, no verified alien presence inside the mall. Miami police denied the extraordinary claims directly. They said there were no aliens, no unidentified flying objects, no extraterrestrials, no closed airports, and no power outages tied to the incident. They also pushed back against the idea that a viral figure in the footage showed something inhuman. The explanation was far more ordinary. A person walking with a shadow. In one sense, that should have ended the story. A disturbance explains the crowd. Fireworks explain the loud bangs. Possible reports of gunfire explain the scale of the response. Police procedure explains why so many officers might come to a dense, public area before every detail is confirmed. Poor lighting and video quality explain the strange shapes. Social media explains the rumor. The pieces fit, but they did not satisfy everyone. That is the part worth slowing down for, because a factual explanation and an emotionally satisfying explanation are not always the same thing. A factual explanation answers what likely happened. An emotional explanation answers why the event felt the way it felt, and the Miami Mall incident left many people with a feeling that the official version did not fully calm. They had seen the lights. They had seen the rows of vehicles. They had seen the clips spreading online. They had heard claims about tall beings, shadow figures, and something hidden inside Bayside Marketplace. By the time the official explanation arrived, the strange version of the story had already created an atmosphere. It had already given people a way to feel the night. Once that happens, facts have to compete with mood, and mood is hard to erase. For skeptics, the case is simple. The official account explains the available evidence better than the alien claim does. There was a real public disturbance. There were juveniles involved. There were fireworks. There was fighting. There were calls that may have treated loud bangs as possible gunfire. A large police response followed. No verified video showed a creature. No reliable report produced a consistent description of a non-human being. That is enough. For believers, the same explanation feels too small. They do not begin with the police report. They begin with the image. The street full of emergency vehicles. The mall surrounded by flashing lights. The size of the response. The feeling that a normal teen disturbance should not look like that. They look at the official version, then back at the footage, and the two do not match in their minds. That mismatch is where suspicion lives. The police version may explain the event, but it cannot erase the public memory of seeing an overwhelming response to an event that sounded smaller afterward. That does not make the alien claim true, but it helps explain why the claim survived. A person watching from home does not feel the uncertainty officers faced in the first minutes. They do not hear the calls as they came in. They do not know whether the first reports mentioned possible gunfire. They do not stand in the crowd while people are moving and shouting. They see the result, the vehicles, the lights, the scale. Then they ask why. And if the official answer feels too plain, as another answer steps in. That is one of the patterns in modern mystery. The most grounded answer is often the least satisfying one. Teenagers, fireworks, crowd panic, and police procedure may explain a chaotic night, but they do not feel like they explain the strange, emotional weight of the videos. They do not explain why the clips looked so severe. They do not explain why the rumor felt possible to so many people. So the mind keeps searching. It searches for a hidden cause, a secret event, a missing piece, a reason the night felt larger than the words used to describe it. Official explanations are built to close a case. They are usually short, firm, and plain. They name the cause, deny the false claims, and move on. That is how institutions speak. They do not usually address the deeper feeling around a rumor. They do not say, "We understand why the footage looked strange." They do not walk people through the emotional path from fear to belief. They simply say what happened and what did not happen. But the internet is not a courtroom. It is not a police briefing. It is a place where feelings keep moving after statements are released. A denial can become part of the story. A correction can be seen as too neat. A lack of clear footage can be seen as missing evidence. A normal explanation can be treated as a cover story because it does not carry the same weight as the image people remember. That is why the Miami Mall incident did not end when police spoke. For many people, the official account answered the physical event. It said what officers believed happened on the ground. It placed the disturbance in the world of human behavior, not alien contact. It made the night smaller, more ordinary, more local. But the viral afterlife had already made it bigger. The story had left Miami. It had become a symbol of something else. Public distrust, fear of hidden events, the belief that strange things are happening in plain sight, the feeling that official answers arrive not to reveal, but to contain. That is why some viewers rejected the police statement almost as soon as they heard it. Not because they had stronger evidence, most did not, but because they no longer trusted the kind of answer being offered. To them, the denial sounded like the very thing a cover-up would say. That is a dangerous loop. If authorities deny the rumor, the denial becomes suspicious. If authorities say nothing, the silence becomes suspicious. If footage is unclear, the lack of clarity becomes suspicious. If clear alien footage never appears, its absence becomes suspicious too. Inside that loop, the story cannot easily be closed. It feeds on the very things meant to end it. This does not mean every question was unreasonable. It is fair for people to ask why the response looks so large. It is fair to wonder how rumors spread so fast. It is fair to ask why unclear clips can make such a strong impression. These are real questions about fear, media, policing, and trust. But those questions do not prove aliens. They prove that the public no longer receives official explanations in a calm and simple way. That may be the deeper story here. The Miami Mall incident sits at the meeting point of two realities. In the first reality, a public disturbance happened. Police responded. Teenagers were arrested, and wild online claims were denied. In the second reality, millions of people saw a strange image and felt that the explanation did not match the scale of what they were watching. Both realities shaped the legend. One gave it facts, the other gave it life. And when those two parts touched, the incident became harder to settle than it should have been. A local disturbance became a national rumor. A shadow became a creature. A denial became part of the mystery. A mall became a stage for a story about hidden contact. The official explanation remains the strongest account of what physically happened that night. It fits the known evidence. It explains the crowd, the sound, the police response, and the lack of clear alien footage. But it did not answer the other question. Why did so many people want the alien version to be true? That question leads away from the mall and into something larger. It leads into distrust, missing footage claims, and the shape every modern cover-up story seems to take once the internet gets hold of it. Once a rumor becomes a cover-up story, it changes form. At first, people ask, what happened? Then they ask why they are not being shown more. Then they ask, who is holding something back? The missing parts become part of the claim. The silence becomes part of the claim. The lack of clear evidence becomes, for some people, the very reason to suspect that evidence exists somewhere else. That is what happened around the Miami Mall incident. The first questions were simple. Why were there so many police vehicles? Why did the response look so large? Why did the clips feel so severe? But as the alien rumor spread, the questions changed. People began asking why there was not more footage, why the supposed beings were not shown clearly, why security cameras had not ended the debate, why body cameras, mall cameras, traffic cameras, and phone cameras had not produced one clean answer. Those are natural questions in a world filled with cameras, but they can also become traps, because people often imagine public recording systems as if they are perfect machines for truth. Every angle covered, every second stored, every image clear, every piece available on command. In that imagined world, if a clear clip does not appear, the absence feels suspicious. But real footage is rarely like that. Security cameras may face the wrong direction. They may be low quality. They may record over themselves. They may belong to private businesses. They may capture only hallways, entrances, counters, or fixed angles. Body cameras may not be released quickly or at all, depending on law, policy, privacy, and whether minors were involved. Phone videos begin after the important moment, not before. People film what they notice, not what later becomes important. Truth can be recorded and still remain incomplete. That is hard for the internet to accept, so the Miami Mall story moved into a familiar shape, the shape of withheld footage, hidden information, a denial that came too fast, A public that was told to move on before it felt ready to move on. No reliable public evidence has shown that alien footage was hidden, and there is no solid basis for accusing Miami police of covering up a non-human event at Bayside Marketplace, but the suspicion did not need proof to spread. It only needed gaps. The gaps were already there. No clear creature video, no close-up recording, no named, verified witness describing a non-human being in a consistent way, no official document pointing to anything beyond a disturbance, fireworks, fighting, panic, and arrest. To a skeptic, those gaps weaken the alien story. They show that the claim has not been supported. To a believer, the same gaps can feel like the outline of concealment. That is the strange turn. The missing evidence becomes evidence of missing evidence, and once that turn happens, the story becomes very hard to settle. If officials deny the claim, the denial sounds expected. If no footage appears, the footage is assumed to be hidden. If a blurry shape is explained as a person and a shadow, the explanation seems too convenient. If the police response is explained as standard escalation after possible gunfire reports, the response still feels too large to those who do not trust the baseline. The cover-up shape protects itself, not completely, not for everyone, but strongly enough to keep the rumor alive. This does not mean every suspicious question is foolish. People are allowed to question public events. They are allowed to ask why a response looks so large. They are allowed to wonder why clips spread faster than official information. They are allowed to dislike how little clear public evidence sometimes appears after chaotic incidents. But questions are not the same as proof. A question can open a path. It cannot fill it by itself. In the Miami case, the cover-up story grew because the event touched something much wider than one mall. It touched a public mood, a feeling that institutions explain too little, a feeling that officials speak in short statements, while the internet sees deeper patterns, a feeling that if something truly strange happened in public, people might never be told the full story. That mood existed before Bayside Marketplace. The incident gave it a stage. Police lights on Biscayne Boulevard became more than a response. They became an image of authority closing around a public space. The absence of a clear creature video became more than a lack of proof. It became a space where people imagined confiscated footage, hidden angles, and missing files. The official denial became more than a denial. It became, in the eyes of some viewers, part of the performance. Again, none of that proves aliens were there, but it shows how the stories grew. Cover-up stories often begin when the official explanation does not match the emotional size of the image. People do not always say, "I have evidence." More often they say, "This feels wrong." Then they look for facts that can carry that feeling. A line of police vehicles, a delayed statement, a blurry clip, a missing camera angle, a phrase from a local report, a claim repeated by strangers, piece by piece. The feeling builds a structure around itself. That structure can look very convincing from the inside, and from the inside, every challenge becomes part of the wall. Skeptics argue that the normal limits of footage and public information are enough to explain the gaps. Not every camera sees the right thing. Not every clip belongs to the public. Not every rumor deserves a special release. Not every strange-looking response hides a secret. Believers answer with the emotional counterpoint. Why did it look so big? Why did so many people talk about tall figures? Why did the explanation feel smaller than the scene? Why does it seem, again and again, that strange public events are explained away before people can look closely. That is not a clean evidence debate. It is a trust debate, and trust is much harder to repair than a timeline. If people trusted every official statement, the Miami Mall rumor would have faded quickly. The police would have said there were no aliens, no unidentified flying objects, no extraterrestrials, no airport closures, and no power outages, and the story would have ended. But for many viewers, the statement landed inside a world where official claims are always placed on trial. The burden had shifted. Authorities were no longer only expected to explain what happened. They were expected to prove that nothing was hidden. That is a much harder thing to prove, because absence does not photograph well. Nothing hidden leaves no image, no creature leaves no body, no cover-up leaves no file. The calm explanation can be true, and still feel weak against a rumor that promises a secret. This is why the Miami Mall incident became bigger than Miami. It was not only about a police response to juveniles, fireworks, fighting, and panic. It was about whether people still believe public explanations when those explanations arrive after fear has already filled the room. It was about whether a society covered in cameras can still produce an unanswered image. It was about whether uncertainty now belongs to institutions or to the crowd online. And the crowd online does not wait. It builds, it labels, it connects. It turns missing footage into a question, and then turns the question into a story. No reliable evidence has shown hidden alien footage from Bayside Marketplace. No verified public record has shown a secret non-human event there. The strongest factual account remains the official one. A disturbance, fireworks, fighting, panic, police response, arrests, and a rumor that grew afterward. But the emotional truth is different. People were not only asking what happened in the mall, they were asking whether anyone in power could still be trusted to tell them if something impossible had happened. That is why the incident kept moving. It had become a symbol, a small public panic with the shape of something larger wrapped around it. A shadow story, a distrust story, a cover-up story, without proven cover-up evidence, but with all the emotional parts people now expect from one. Flashing lights, missing clarity, official denial, a crowd that refuses to settle. The Miami Mall alien story was built in layers. A real event came first, then a dramatic image, then a vague shape, then a caption, then a repost, then a belief. By the time many people heard about the incident, they were no longer hearing about a public disturbance at Bayside Marketplace. They were hearing about a possible encounter. That is how quickly the frame changed. The original incident had the parts that make a story move online. It had a known public location. It had police lights. It had a crowd. It had fear. It had enough official information to ground the story, but not enough immediate clarity to stop people from imagining more. Then came the clips, short and strange enough to travel far beyond Miami. After that, the internet did what it does best. It built a shape around the unknown. A clip of police vehicles does not need to show a creature to become part of an alien story. It only needs a caption that tells people what to look for. Once the caption says there were 8 to 10 foot beings, the viewer enters the video differently. The eyes search the shadows. The mind leans toward the edges of the frame. Every long shape becomes a possible clue. The same footage, under a different label, becomes a different event. If someone labels the clip as a mall disturbance, the viewer sees police work. If someone labels it as possible gunfire, the viewer sees danger. If someone labels it as aliens in Miami, the viewer sees mystery. And if someone labels it as a cover-up, the viewer sees the denial before the denial has even arrived. The caption becomes a lens. That lens is powerful because most viewers do not arrive at a viral video with fresh eyes. They arrive through someone else's sentence, a short claim above the video, a voice speaking over the clip, a comment pinned underneath, a title designed to stop the scroll. Before the viewer has examined the image has already been explained to them. And often, the first explanation wins. That first explanation does not have to be true. It only has to be vivid. It only has to give the viewer a reason to stay for the next 10 seconds. In that world, the careful version of a story moves slowly. The strange version moves fast. Social media rewards the version that makes people pause. Not always the version that is most careful. That does not mean everyone who shared the Miami story believed it fully. Many did not. Some shared it as a joke. Some shared it as a meme. Some shared it because it sounded wild. Some shared it because they wanted to see what others would say. But every share gave the story more life. Even disbelief can spread a rumor if the rumor is interesting enough. That is one of the strange rules of the online world. Mockery still moves the claim. A person posts, "They think aliens were at the Miami Mall," and means it as ridicule. But someone else sees only the keywords, aliens, Miami, mall, police response. Another person looks up the clips. Another person finds a zoomed frame. Another finds a thread claiming hidden footage. Soon, the joke and the belief are traveling on the same road. The story no longer needs everyone to believe it. It only needs everyone to repeat it. CBS Miami and other local reporting noted that terms tied to the incident, including Miami Mall and aliens in Miami, spread widely across social media. That was not only a sign of interest, it was part of the event's second life. The incident had moved from the street into the feed, and once it reached the feed, it became less about what happened at Bayside Marketplace and more about what the public could make from it. A rumor online is not a single object, it is a swarm. One post focuses on the police response, another on the supposed tall beings, another on a blurry shape, another on missing footage, another on airport closures that police later denied, another on power outages that police also denied. Another turns the whole thing into a joke. Another treats the joke as cover for something serious. The story spreads by changing form. That is why it becomes so difficult to trace. By the time a person sees the 10th version, the first version may already be gone. The claim may have lost its source. A guess becomes a report. A report becomes a fact in someone's comment. A comment becomes a voiceover. A voiceover becomes a clip on another platform. And each time it moves, it can gain new details. This is how the encounter was built. Not by one clear witness standing before a camera and giving a full account. Not by one official document. Not by one clean piece of footage, but by thousands of small acts of framing. A caption here, a freeze frame there, a slow zoom, a dramatic voice, a comment saying, "Look at the shadow." Another saying, "Why so many cops?" Another saying, "They are hiding something." Together, those pieces created the feeling of a case. The internet does not simply report mysteries anymore. It helps make the shape of the mystery in real time. Unidentified flying object and conspiracy communities did not invent the police response. That part was real. They did not invent the fact that officers filled the area. That was visible. They did not invent the existence of confusion. The confusion was already there, but they gave the confusion a familiar framework: shadow beings, hidden footage, official denial, mass memory, a public told not to trust its own eyes. Those patterns already existed in the wider culture. The Miami incident simply slid into them. Once the story was placed in that framework, people knew how to talk about it. They knew where the villain might be. They knew where the missing evidence might be imagined. They knew what kind of official denial to expect. They knew how to read the absence of proof as part of the story. That made the rumor feel older than it was. It had the mood of an old case file, even though it was born from modern clips. This is where the intro's quiet hook begins to pay off. Millions of people were willing to consider the possibility of a creature not because a clear video showed one, but because the story arrived with images that felt frightening. Police lights, crowds, dark shapes, official corrections. A public place suddenly turned strange. The footage did not clearly show the claim, but it made the claim feel possible. That is enough for a viral mystery. Possibility spreads faster than proof because proof asks for patience. Possibility asks only for attention. It says, look again. It says, maybe. It says, what if the official explanation is not the whole thing? It does not need to win the argument today. It only needs to keep the viewer from closing the tab. And so the Miami Mall incident kept moving. Through reposts, through comments, through stitched clips, through memes, through short videos where the speaker sounded certain even when the evidence was not. Each new version added weight. Not factual weight, social weight. The feeling that if enough people are talking, there must be something there. The feeling that a story repeated across platforms has earned a place in the public mind simply by surviving. But survival is not truth. A rumor can survive because it is useful, because it is scary, because it is funny, because it fits the distrust people already carry, because it turns a messy event into a simple one, because it offers a hidden meaning where the official version offers only noise, teenagers, fireworks, and police procedure. The alien version had meaning. That was its power. It turned chaos into contact. It turned a local disturbance into a cosmic hint. It turned a blurry shadow into a visitor. It turned police lights into evidence of something larger. For people already open to that possibility, the story did not need much more. And for people who did not believe it, the story still held interest because it showed something true about the internet itself. We now watch events become legends while they are still being explained. That is new. In older folklore, the story changed slowly. A tale moved from one person to another, one town to another, one year to another. Details shifted over time. The strange part grew in the retelling. But it took patience. It took distance. Now the distance is gone. A public disturbance can become an alien encounter before the official statement has finished spreading. A shadow can become a being before the original video has been checked. A denial can become suspicious before people have even read it. The legend is born while the facts are still arriving. That is what happened here. The Miami Mall incident became a new kind of folklore, not told around fires, not written first in books, not carried by one witness into a local archive. It was built from pixels, comments, fear, and suspicion. A story assembled by people who were not there, watching clips made by people who did not know what the clips would become. That does not make it meaningless. It may make it more revealing. Because the encounter the internet built tells us less about aliens and more about us. It shows how fast we can turn confusion into pattern, how quickly a crowd panic can become a hidden event, how eagerly we search blurry images for confirmation of the strange world we already suspect may be there. The Miami Mall incident did not need a clear creature to become an alien story. It needed a crowd, a camera, a caption, and a public ready to believe that the ordinary world might be hiding something just outside the frame. The most persuasive image in a mystery is not always the clearest one. Sometimes it is the image that withholds just enough. A clear picture has edges. It gives the eye something firm. A person can point to it and say, "This is what it shows." A shape has a size. A body has a position. A shadow has a source. A movement can be followed from one frame to the next. But blurry footage does something different. It invites the viewer in. It asks the mind to finish what the camera cannot. It leaves space for fear, hope, distrust, and imagination. It does not close the door. It leaves it half open, and a half-open door can feel more powerful than a locked one. That is why the Miami Mall footage kept pulling people back. There was no verified close-up video of non-human beings at Bayside Marketplace. No clear creature walking through the mall. No stable shot of an 8 to 10 foot being standing beside people for scale. No recording that allowed the claim to be checked in a clean, simple way. The rumor relied on ambiguous imagery, distant figures, shadows, compression, police lights, movement seen through low resolution and fear. A dark form that some viewers treated as strange. A scene that felt too large for the explanation many were given afterward. That was enough. Not enough for proof, enough for belief. The difference matters. Proof has to stand still long enough to be tested. Belief can move faster. It can attach to a feeling before the facts have settled. It can grow from a frame that does not show much, as long as the frame makes the viewer feel that something is being withheld. This is where blurry footage becomes strangely powerful. A clear image can disappoint people. It can show that the object was a person, a bag, a shadow, a reflection, a normal body seen from a bad angle. Once the picture is sharp, the mystery may collapse. The strange thing becomes ordinary, and the story loses its charge. But an unclear image protects the mystery. It lets the viewer say, "You cannot prove it is not there." It lets another viewer say, "You cannot prove it is there." Both return to the same pixels. Both feel the other person is missing what matters. That is not because the footage contains more truth. It is because it contains more room. The less detail an image gives, the more the mind can place inside it. And once the mind places something there, it can be hard to remove. At Bayside Marketplace, the visual field was already difficult. Night, movement, flashing lights, distance, crowds, a public place in disorder. Phone cameras trying to handle bright glare and dark shadows at the same time. Clips passing from platform to platform, losing clarity with each riposte. Zoomed frames pulled away from their original motion. Short sections cut out and shown again without the longer scene around them. That kind of footage is fragile. It can make the ordinary look wrong. A person crossing through a light source can appear stretched. A shadow can move in a way that looks separate from the body that made it. A group of people can merge into one shape when the quality drops. A distant figure can seem too tall because the viewer has no clear scale. A moment of normal motion can look strange when slowed down, paused, circled, and replayed. Then the caption arrives. Look at the shadow. Look behind the police. Look at the tall figure. Once those words are in the viewer's mind, the image changes. The viewer is no longer simply watching. The viewer is searching. And searching is never neutral. It turns every unclear part of the frame into a possible answer. A dark patch becomes a clue. A blur becomes a body. A body becomes a being. This process does not always require bad faith. Many people who searched those videos may have been sincere. They may have felt that something did not fit. They may have watched the footage again and again because the scene carried a real unease. The police response was real. The panic was real. The confusion was real. But sincerity does not make an image clear, and feeling does not make a shadow into evidence. The internet has made this kind of searching almost automatic. A strange clip appears, and within minutes, people begin freezing frames. They zoom in. They brighten the dark areas. They draw circles around shapes. They compare one angle to another. They slow the video down until ordinary motion no longer looks ordinary. Sometimes that work reveals something real. Often, it creates a new problem. The more a low-quality image is pushed, cropped, brightened, and enlarged, the less reliable it becomes. The image begins to break apart. Blocks of color appear where there were once soft edges. Shadows thicken. Light blooms. Movement becomes choppy. Details that were never captured by the camera are treated as if they are hidden inside the frame, waiting to be pulled out. But a blurry image cannot always be rescued. Sometimes there is no secret detail inside it. Sometimes the blur is the whole thing. That is difficult to accept when a story has already become powerful. People want the image to give more than it can give. They want the frame to confirm the feeling. They want the strange mood of the night and to leave a visible mark. If the official explanation feels too plain, then the blurry footage becomes the last place where mystery can still breathe. So, the footage is asked to carry more weight than it can hold. That is what happened with the Miami Mall incident. The videos became more than records of a police response. They became a screen for projection, a place where viewers placed distrust, fear, wonder, and the hope that something impossible has almost been caught. Almost. That word keeps returning. Almost visible, almost proven, almost hidden in the frame, almost clear enough to settle the argument. But almost does not settle anything. It keeps the story alive. The less the image shows, the more some people feel it is hiding. That is the emotional trick at the center of blurry evidence. Absence begins to feel like concealment. Poor quality begins to feel like suppression. Distance begins to feel like secrecy. The camera's failure becomes part of the mystery, rather than a limit of the recording. And because the footage never fully answers, the viewer keeps returning. One more zoom, one more angle, one more slow replay, one more explanation of the shape. The Miami Mall rumor survived in that loop. It did not survive because clear proof appeared. It survived because the available images refused to fully close. They were grounded enough to feel real and vague enough to feel open. They showed a public event, but not its deepest meaning. They showed police lights, but not the cause that people online wanted to find. That made them perfect material for a modern legend. Clear proof ends a story. Unclear footage can keep it breathing for years. This is why the Miami incident still matters, even without verified alien evidence. It shows how a blurry image can become more emotionally powerful than a clean answer. It shows how a vague shape can hold more attention than a plain statement. It shows how the public has learned to distrust clarity and lean toward the shadow instead. There is something very human in that. We do not only want to know what happened, we want the story to match how the moment felt. And if the official explanation feels too small, we search the dark parts of the frame for something larger. Sometimes we find only pixels. Sometimes we find only fear. And sometimes, in the space between those two, a legend begins. The Miami Mall rumor did not spread in an empty world. It arrived at a time when alien stories no longer lived. Only at the edge of culture, they were no longer just late night or radio, old paperbacks, blurry home videos, and people laughing at strange lights in the sky. In the years before the Miami incident, unidentified aerial phenomena had moved into a more public space. Military videos were discussed on major news programs. Congressional hearings brought the subject into official rooms. Whistleblower claims reached millions of people. Podcasts, documentaries, and online channels kept the question alive every day. None of that proves anything about Bayside Marketplace. It does not prove that creatures were there. It does not prove the 8 to 10 foot claim. It does not turn a blurry shadow into a being. But it helps explain why so many people were ready to accept the possibility so quickly. The ground had already been prepared. A rumor needs a culture to receive it. It needs people who already know the shape of the story. It needs an audience that can hear a strange claim and place it inside something larger. By January 1st, 2024, many people had spent years hearing that the skies might be stranger than officials once admitted. They had heard pilots describe objects they could not identify. They had watched clips from military sources. They had listened to arguments about secrecy, recovery programs, hidden files, and the slow leak of forbidden knowledge. Again, that does not prove aliens. It proves readiness. And readiness matters. If the same Miami rumor had spread in a different decade, it might have sounded too absurd for most people to repeat. A public mall, a police response, tall beings moving through the crowd. It might have been dismissed quickly as a joke, or a panic story, or a strange local rumor with no real life beyond the first week. But in this moment, the idea found more oxygen. The public had already been taught to ask whether official answers were complete. It had already been invited to wonder whether unknown objects are being tracked by military systems. It had already seen serious people use careful words around strange events, not proof of alien life, not open confirmation, but enough attention to make the subject feel less distant than before. That shift changed the way people heard the Miami story. The alien version did not have to build belief from nothing. It could borrow from a wider mood, a mood of uncertainty, a mood of suspicion, a mood that said, maybe the impossible is not impossible anymore. Maybe the world has hidden rooms. Maybe officials know more than they say. Into that mood came the mall. Bright lights, police lines, crowds, a rumor of tall shadow beings, a denial, a blurry clip. For some people, the pieces clicked together too easily. That is not because the evidence was strong. The evidence was not strong. It is because the story fit a pattern people already knew. Strange event, large response, confusing footage, official explanation, public doubt. Then the question that follows every modern mystery. What are we not seeing? That question is powerful because it does not need an answer to keep moving. It only needs the feeling that an answer is being withheld. And alien stories have always lived close to that feeling, as they are about the unknown in the sky, but they are also about the unknown in institutions. Who has the files? Who has the footage? Who knows what the public does not know? The Miami incident touched that nerve. The official version was more ordinary. Teenagers, fireworks, fighting, panic, police procedure. A person walking with a shadow. It may explain the physical event better than any alien claim does, but it does not satisfy the older hunger that sits underneath so many contact stories. The hunger for hidden meaning. That is part of the emotional appeal of the alien version. It turns a chaotic public disturbance into something vast. It turns a bad night at a mall into a cosmic sign. It turns fear into contact. It turns confusion into proof that the world is stranger than the daily news allows. The official version makes the night smaller. The alien version makes it enormous. People often prefer a frightening mystery to a dull explanation, because mystery gives fear a shape. If the night was only panic, then it was ugly, human, and ordinary. Loud fireworks, fighting, people running, officers trying to regain control. No higher meaning, no hidden visitor, no doorway opening between worlds. But if the night involved beings, even only in rumor, then it becomes something else. It becomes part of a larger story. A story about contact. A story about secrecy. A story about the thin wall between normal life and the impossible. That is why the alien claim could feel more satisfying, even while being less supported. It gave the public a cleaner emotional shape than the facts did. The facts were messy. The rumor was simple. There were beings at the mall. Police came. Officials denied it. Something was hidden. A simple story is easier to carry, and if that story touches a fear people already have, it travels even farther. The Miami Mall incident also arrived in a culture where images are no longer trusted in a simple way. People know videos can mislead. They know clips can be edited. They know captions can twist meaning. But instead of making everyone more cautious, this sometimes makes people more suspicious. A clear denial can seem staged. A lack of footage can seem planned. A blurry image can feel more honest than a polished statement. The shadow becomes more trusted than the explanation. That is a strange reversal. Once people might have said, "Show me clear proof." Now, some people say, the proof would never be allowed to stay clear. If no clean image exists, they suspect it was removed. If the only surviving image is blurry, they treat the blur as a trace of something suppressed. And that mindset did not begin at Bayside Marketplace, but the incident gave it a place to gather. And there is something deeply human in that too. People do not only believe stories because of evidence. They believe them because of need, fear, hope, distrust, and timing. A rumor can arrive at exactly the moment a culture is ready for it. And then it grows out, not because it is proven, but because it sounds like what people already feel. By early 2024, many people already felt that the world was hiding something. The Miami rumor gave that feeling a scene. A public mall by the water, a crowd running, police lights on the street, a shadow in a video. The possibility that something had passed through ordinary life and vanished before anyone could film it clearly. That image was stronger than the facts for some viewers. Not because it was more true, but because it reached a place the facts could not. It reached the part of the mind that wants the world to break open. The part that wants the hidden thing to finally step into public view. The part that looks at a normal city street and wonders whether normal is only the surface. This is why the story kept breathing after the corrections. It was not only about whether aliens were at Bayside Marketplace. It was about whether people are now ready to see alien meaning in almost any unexplained public shock. A police response becomes a hint. A crowd panic becomes an encounter. A blurry shadow becomes a body. A denial becomes part of the pattern. The culture completes the story, just as the mind completes the frame. That does not make the story factual. It makes it revealing. It shows what people were already carrying into the night. Distrust, hope, fear, a hunger for contact, a suspicion that official life is thinner than it looks, a sense that something may be waiting just outside the edge of everyday vision. The Miami Mall incident became a mirror. Some looked into it and saw a public panic. Some saw a failed rumor. Some saw proof of how easily the internet can mislead itself. Others saw the outline of something hidden. Not because the evidence demanded it, but because the world already felt strange enough for them to believe it might be true. And that may be the most important cultural point. The alien story did not only spread because people misunderstood a shadow. It spread because, for many, the idea of aliens was no longer absurd enough to stop the rumor at the door. It had become one possible answer among many, even in a crowded mall, even in a city, even under police lights. The world had changed enough for the story to enter, not as proof, as possibility. And possibility is sometimes all a legend needs. After the panic, the mall returned to itself. That is what places do. The crowds thin out. The police lights fade. The last officers leave the edge of the street. Workers sweep the floors. Dropped items are gathered. Storefronts reopen. The waterfront air keeps moving over Biscayne Bay as if nothing strange ever touched it. A public place has a way of healing its own surface, but the internet does not close that quickly. Long after Bayside Marketplace went back to being a mall, the story kept moving. People replayed the clips. They argued over shadows. They questioned the response. They repeated the 8 to 10 foot claim. They treated the official explanation as either the answer or the beginning of a larger suspicion. The physical event ended. The legend did not. That is where the Miami Mall incident leaves us. Not with verified proof of aliens at Bayside Marketplace. Not with clear footage of creatures. Not with a confirmed non-human figure moving through the crowd. There is no verified evidence that aliens, unidentified flying objects, extraterrestrials, or non-human beings were present there that night. That has to be said plainly. The strongest factual account remains the grounded one. A large disturbance, juveniles, fighting, fireworks, panic, reports that some people believed might be gunfire, a police response that looked enormous from the outside, arrests, online rumors, a shadow explained as a person walking under strong light. That is the base of the story. But the lack of alien evidence does not make the incident meaningless. It makes it something else. A case study in how modern mystery forms. Not from one clean sighting. Not from one witness standing alone beneath a silent craft. Not from a recovered object, a radar track, or a sealed government file. This one formed from fear moving through a crowd, footage moving through phones, and suspicion moving through people who no longer trust simple answers. That may be less cosmic. It is not less strange, because what happened after the event tells us something about the world now. Fear moved faster than facts. Footage outlived context. A shadow became a story that traveled far beyond the place where it was filmed. A local disturbance became a global argument about aliens, cover-ups, police response, and what can still be believed. That is a modern kind of haunting. No haunted house, no empty field, no lonely road, just a crowded mall, a police response, and millions of people trying to decide what the images meant. The most unsettling part was not that a creature was proven to exist. It was not. The unsettling part was that so many people could feel one into existence from fragments, a few seconds of unclear footage, a line of police vehicles, a claim repeated often enough to sound familiar, a culture already waiting for the next strange thing. From those pieces, a visitor appeared, not in the mall, in the story. And once the visitor existed there, it became hard to remove. Even correction could not fully erase it. Even official denial could not stop people from returning to the clips. Even the lack of proof did not end the feeling that something about the night was wrong. That is the strange power of rumor. It does not always need to defeat the facts. It only needs to survive beside them. In one version of the Miami Mall incident, the case is simple. Police responded to a public disturbance. The alien claims were false. The viral figure was a person and a shadow. The footage showed no non-human beings. The event was explained. In another version, the facts do not feel like enough. The police response still looks too large. The clips still feel uneasy. The lack of clean footage still feels suspicious. The official words still feel smaller than the image of those lights filling the street. The first version is stronger as evidence. The second is stronger as feeling. And online, feeling travels far. That does not mean the feeling is true. It means the feeling has force. It can carry a story past the point where proof should have stopped it. It can keep people watching a frame that gives them nothing new. It can make a correction sound like a door being closed too quickly. This is why the Miami Mall incident belongs in the wider archive of strange modern stories, even if it is not a confirmed encounter. It shows the new shape of mystery, a crowd, a camera, a rumor, a public that no longer fully trusts what it is told. An ordinary place made strange by the way people looked back at it. Older case files often ask what was in the sky. This one asks what was in the frame. And maybe even more quietly, what was already in us. The need to make meaning from confusion. The need to turn fear into a shape. The need to believe that chaos has a hidden center. The need to imagine that something larger was present. Because the ordinary explanation feels too flat for the size of the fear. That need is very old. Only the tools are new. Once, a story like this might have stayed local. Someone at the mall heard something. Someone else saw people running. A few rumors moved through the city. Then the next week came, and the story thinned out. But now, nothing thins out easily. A clip can be saved forever. A rumor can be reborn every time someone reposts it. A shadow can be rediscovered by someone who was not there, months or years later. The event becomes detached from the night and begins living as a symbol. Bayside Marketplace becomes the Miami Mall incident. The disturbance becomes the alien rumor. The shadow becomes the being. No creature. Still a legend. That is the final balance. The official explanation may answer the physical event, but the viral afterlife reveals something strange about us. It shows how quickly we can build a hidden world out of public confusion. It shows how ready we are to doubt the plain answer. It shows how a blurry image can feel more alive than a clear statement. And it shows that modern mystery no longer needs darkness in the old sense. It can happen under storefront lights, under police lights, under the glow of a phone screen. It can happen in the middle of a city with thousands of people nearby and still leave behind an argument about what was really seen. The Miami Mall incident is not proof of contact, but it is proof of something. It is proof that fear can make a crowd move before anyone understands why. It is proof that unclear footage can become a public mirror. It is proof that distrust can turn a simple denial into another piece of the story. And it is proof that, in the right light, with the right fear, even an ordinary shadow can become a visitor. The story ends where it began, at a public place by the water. The crowds have gone home. The lights have cooled. The official words have been spoken. But somewhere online, the shadow still moves, again and again, inside the same blurry frame, and people are still asking what it was. Now, we leave them all behind and close with the quieter question it left for everyone watching. And so, the Miami Mall incident leaves behind a quieter kind of mystery. Not clear footage of aliens, not a confirmed visitor, not a clean case file that can be opened, checked, and closed. What it leaves behind is the shape of a modern legend forming in real time. A crowd, a noise, a police response, a blurry frame, and a public that no longer knows exactly where trust should rest. Some of you may already be drifting off now. Others may still be thinking about that strange line between what happened and what people believed happened. That line can be thin. It can move under fear. It can move under shadows. It can move when a story reaches the internet before the truth has found its own voice. Maybe that is why this incident stayed with so many people. Not because it proved contact, but because it showed how quickly confusion can become meaning, how quickly a shadow can become a sign, how quickly an ordinary place can feel, for a moment, like a doorway into something else. You've been listening to Close Encounters. Remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story.